Iron Man 3 is an enjoyable movie. It really has everything you could want out of a big-budget, summery, popcorn movie. It's got explosions, special effects, fireproof sports bras, and Guy Pearce. It's not a perfect movie, but all in all, I liked it. Hell, I even liked the Mandarin twist.
This is bullshit.
At the end of the day, you get exactly what you paid for with Iron Man 3, which is a good thing. Shane Black and company knew exactly what it needed to be and did an admirable job at executing it. On a purely fundamental level, there's nothing to fault it for. But this is the internet, and purely fundamental is for the birds. Nitpicking's all the rage. And there is one nit that's been picking away at me since I watched Iron Man 3 for the first time. How'd he power all those suits? Okay, backstory. Iron Man is Tony Stark, a guy who, by all intents and purposes, should be dead. The only reason he isn't is because of something called an arc reactor. It's a magic little box in his chest that keeps shrapnel from puncturing his heart. It also produces a near infinite quantity of free energy. Outraged by the war profiteering he sees his company involved in, Tony uses the greatest scientific discovery in human history to power his personal, tailored-to-fit weapon of mass destruction to fight for truth, justice, and the American by-God way. Now, as ridiculous as that sounds, I've no problem with it, and neither should you. Iron Man is a comic book character. He's not from our universe. The rules that govern our existence do not hold sway over Tony Stark, but it's important to remember that universes do have rules. And whoever you are, be you Joe Schmo watching a video in Hoboken,
hell no, babe! No, bitch, what's wrong with you, girl?
or that spicy little tomato that discovered how to turn plants into bombs in Iron Man 3, you have to adhere to those rules. Granted, the consequences of non-compliance are radically different for us. Say we want to travel faster than the speed of light. Now we can't just go out there and do it all willy-nilly because it's all of a sudden more convenient. If we traipse too close to a black hole, we're fucked. No two ways around it. But in Iron Man's universe, breaking the rules just leaves you with this nagging little voice in your head that says things like, how'd he power all those suits? Here's the crux of the whole issue. The Iron Man suit only works because of the arc reactor, and the only arc reactor in existence belongs to Tony Stark. Therefore, an Iron Man suit could not work unless Tony is inside of it. Now, I base this on the events of the first Iron Man movie. You know, the one where the entire narrative is driven by the fact that the dude can't replicate an arc reactor and eventually has to tear the one out of Tony Stark's chest in order to power his big clunky ironmonger? Now, I'm not kidding about that being the entire driving force of the narrative. There's so much emphasis put into the fact that without an arc reactor, not only is Tony dead, but the suit is little more than an expensive piece of fetish wear, that it gets ingrained into the inner workings of the Iron Man, and by extension, the entire Marvel movie universe. It's one of the rules. Well, here comes Iron Man 2, and the arc reactor is no longer a necessary plot device. Tony's pal gets plastic surgery to look like Don Cheadle, and winds up commandeering one of Tony's suits in order to thrust a big old middle finger at Ayn Rand and her godless objectivism. Now notice the distinct lack of an arc reactor in Rhodey's possession. For some reason, this didn't bother me either. I've known about War Machine from the comic book for years, and it was logical that the movies would throw him into the mix as well. But that doesn't negate the fact that according to the rules of this universe, Rhodey should have never been able to get in the suit in the first place. By the time Iron Man 3 came around, there was a whole new creative team, and they decided to collectively reverse the metaphorical polarity of the neutron flow and completely ignore the one primary driving force in Iron Man's universe, that you need an arc reactor to power one of these goddamn things. So now you've not only got the Iron Patriot wandering around, but the climax of the movie features about 1,000 unmanned Iron Man suits zipping around blowing shit up. Now, I've brought this up to some people before, and they've all said that each of these Iron Man suits are equipped with its own arc reactor. Well, fuck you, I say. Why? Well, let us harken back to Iron Man 2. In that movie, Tony Stark makes it perfectly clear that he has no intention to share his Iron Man technology, and by that I mean arc reactor, with the federal government or anybody else. Now, he does this in front of Congress, for God's sake. Now, aside from unintentionally casting our protagonist as kind of a prick for keeping a source of free, clean, renewable, compact, and relatively stable energy to himself,
pollution. All around. Sometimes up, sometimes down.
it also establishes him as a fiercely independent guy whose greatest concern is watching his creation get turned into, a war machine, I guess. If anybody's going to be blasting third world Middle Eastern despots into clam chowder, it's going to be Tony Stark, for Pete's sake. So that begs the question, in Iron Man 3, how'd the government get an arc reactor in order to power the Iron Patriot? I mean, if Tony's so damned worried about his technology falling into the wrong hands or otherwise being perverted, would he really risk having multiple spare arc reactors just lying around? For the sake of plot expediency, I guess, the whole arc reactor thing simply stopped being necessary to advance the story of the movies, and therefore, it gets largely ignored. There's an Iron Man suit, it's got a light in its chest. Great! Let's boogie! The rules of the universe simply no longer matter. This is what bothered me about Iron Man 3, and for the most part, every other reboot, remake, and reimagining that's been produced in the last 10 years or so. See, when a person creates a character, he or she is also creating the world in which that character lives. The rules of that world dictate how that character acts and the decisions that he or she has to make. Now, in real-life dramas, that's not such a big deal. By and large, they take place in our universe. But when you start dealing in wildly fanciful worlds where people fly around in suits of armor or go boldly where no one has gone before, these rules all of a sudden become a hell of a lot more relevant. Without a reason for these characters to be able to do all these things that are so far outside of our day-to-day reality, we find it hard to buy them as real people that we should give a turkey about. See, the rules ground us, and they allow us to say things like, oh, alright, in Captain Kirk's reality, you have to be relatively close to something in order to use the transporter. That makes sense. Everything that's happening, well, it's bullshit, but there's pseudoscience being bandied about, and that helps me accept it and suspend disbelief. Now, this is a fundamental rule of the Star Trek universe. It's based in science. Phony, made-up science, but science nonetheless. The new Star Trek movies decided to say fuck it to all the rules and replace them with explosions. Now, you call it nitpicking, I call it disrespect for the original creation. These new movies simply don't exist in the same universe as the originals. They can't. The rules established in the originals are completely disregarded and replaced with something new. New rules. And that would be fine and dandy if the makers of the new Star Trek movies didn't insist on trying to tie these new movies in with the originals. Shit! I'm getting sidetracked. Oh yeah, Iron Man 3. See, they set up a set of circumstances that are required in order for an Iron Man suit to work. They established the character of the man who created the arc reactors as someone who just wouldn't go around and share that technology with the government. Well, I mean, unless something major happened. Something that fundamentally changed how the character's world was working. I don't know, maybe then he'd have a change of heart.
Nothing's been the same since New York.
So last time you got a good night's sleep.
When can we talk about New York? That giant wormhole?
You know that's a one-way trip.
Maybe he decided that for the greater good, for the defense of his world from this now looming threat, he'd trust his best friend with an arc reactor of his own to power a suit. And maybe he'd go on a binge and build about 1,000 other suits and the arc reactors to power them. Maybe he's afraid. Maybe he's afraid that if and when a repeat of what happened takes place again, he alone wouldn't be able to stop it. What if he almost died the last time? And what if the makers of these movies thought it was best just to have all that buried in the subtext? Maybe they just didn't feel like it was necessary to spell it all out. I should really stop nitpicking.